All right, everybody. It looks like the time is here, and it's 2 o'clock. This is Herb Smart with the West Turlock Subbasin GSA and a member of the TAC. Just like we did the past 2 times we had Zoom meetings. I'm going to go over some ground rules, and then I'll hand off everything to our chair and co-chair chairs of the 2 committees to run the meeting. So just a reminder, don't put the call on hold and go on mute until you wish to speak. It'll be helpful for everybody. Don't forget to unmute when it's your time to speak or you have something to say. We got members of the public here. We got members of the committees. We're going to follow the agenda. There's a public participation item that we will get to very quickly. And so if you're a member of the public that wishes to speak, kind of make note of that. People are listening on their computers and also on phones using Zoom. We have a raise hand feature that we'll look for, and there's a chat feature too that we try and monitor to the best of our ability with staff. And also the meeting is being recorded and will be made available afterwards on the Turlock Groundwater website. I'm going to pull up now a copy of the agenda, and I will hand everything over to leadership to run the meeting. Looks like the first item is going to be welcome and meeting procedures. I covered a little bit of that, but I will hand over to Lacey. I believe it's Lacey who's going to be doing that. So it's all you.
Great, thanks, Herb. This is Lacey McBride with Merced County. I'm the vice chair of the West Turlock GSA TAC. Is Kevin Kaufman on the line yet? So hopefully we'll get Kevin soon, who is the chair of the East Turlock TAC. In the meantime, let's just do a quick roll call to find out who the TAC members who are on the line and also the members of the public. So I'll run through some of the TAC membership, and if you're representing your agency, go ahead and let us know that you're here. From TID, who do we have?
Hi, this is Debbie Liebersbach with the TID.
Bill Gobey with TID.
Michael Clipper with TID.
Karen Morgan, City of Series.
Leandro Maldonado.
Miguel Alvarez, City Modesto.
Leandro Maldonado, Delhi CWD.
Michael Cook, TID.
Great. I heard a handful of people from TID, heard Debbie, Michael Cook, Phil. I think Michael Clipper is on from the City of Ceres. Karen is on from the City of Modesto. Miguel is on from the City of Turlock. Who do we have? Is Fallon on? I can see Fallon on the list, but she's on mute, so we'll come back to the City of Turlock. I heard Leandro from Delhi. Oh, there she is. Is that Fallon?
Sorry.
Okay, great.
I'm here, yes.
Great. Delhi County Water District, Leandro from Dunair Community Services District. Do we have anybody?
Yeah, David Odom from Dunair CSD.
Hi, Dave. David.
Hi.
Hillmar County Water District, who do we have?
Curtis is here.
Hi, Curtis. Stanislaus County.
All board.
Great. Well, anybody from the City of Waterford? And Keith Community Services District? I thought I saw Michelle on the list from Keith, but she might be on mute. And again, I'm Lacey with Merced County. So for the West Turlock TAC, we have, it looks like we've got a quorum of members. We have 10 members. For the quorum, we do count both members and associate members. I think we've had some discussion internally wondering if our quorum number should be a number of 6 or 7, whether or not we count the associate members. And looking back through some of the documentation and the resolution that the board passed, when putting together this TAC, they did include the associate members. And so our quorum number is 7, and we do have a quorum for the West Turlock TAC. For the East Turlock, has Kevin joined?
Yes, I have, Lacey, thank you.
Great, Kevin, do you want to go through your roll call?
Opening the meeting?
Yep.
Sure, happy to. Call the meeting of the East Turlock Subbasin GSA Technical Advisory Committee to order. Roll call, do we have somebody from Stanislaus County? I heard Ward.
Yes, Walt Ward.
Walt Ward is here. How about Merced County?
Yeah, Lacey's here.
Lacey's here. And from Blanco Cortez?
I'm here, Dennis.
Dennis is here. Thank you, Dennis. And Merced Irrigation District. Okay. We have a quorum, and myself, Kevin Kaufman, being from East Turlock Subbasin GSA and East Side Water District. So we have a quorum and we can proceed.
Great, thank you, Kevin. Let's just take a moment to let anybody who's on the line who's a member of the public just introduce themselves and let us know that they're here. If you're a member of the public, just chime in.
Stacey Ann Silva, New Current Water and Land.
Milt Treeweiler, Turlock citizen.
Amanda
Spreck Rosecrans. Go ahead.
Okay, Amanda Peisterby, DWR.
Spreck Rosecrans, Restore Hetchy.
Great.
Hi, I may have missed it earlier. Carla Howdicke with the City of Houston.
Oh, City of Houston, great. Thank you, Carla. Okay, so moving on, we're going on to item number 4 on our agenda. This is the approval of minutes. There is a little bit of a difference between the West Turlock GSA TAC and the East Turlock GSA TAC. For the West Turlock, there are 3 months of minutes that we need to approve. We did not have a quorum in the April meeting, and we did not have a quorum in the March meeting. So minutes for February 27th, March 26th, and April 23rd all need to be approved for the West Turlock Subbasin GSA. And the minutes were attached in the agenda that was emailed out. Are there any comments on the minutes, or does anybody have a motion?
Move to approve.
And who's that?
Curtis.
Curtis?
Karen will second.
Karen will second. And anybody, let's see, anybody opposing, just verbally oppose. And I think we can call for a voice vote on this. I think we did that last time. Am I incorrect, Valerie? Kincaid, can we call for just a voice vote?
Yeah, I would call for everyone in favor and then call for opposed. If there are opposed people, you should probably do a roll call, but if there's not, you can do it that way.
Okay, great. So all in favor, say aye.
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 Anybody opposed? Okay, so for the West Turlock TAC, the minutes for February, March, and April have been approved. Kevin?
Thank you, Lacey. And can I have a motion from the East Side for the April 23rd, 2020 regular meeting minutes, please?
This is Dennis. I'll move to approve the minutes.
As Walt, I'll second that.
Thank you, gentlemen. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any against? Hearing none against, passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Now we're on to item number 5. This is public participation. So this is the time set aside for the members of the public to directly address the TAC on any item of interest to the public that's within the subject matter jurisdiction of the committee. And so I'll open it up if any member of the public would like to make a comment. Now is the time.
This is Spreck Rosecrans. I'd like to say a few words. I represent the conservation group Restore Hetch Hetchy, and I think you're all aware that Hetch Hetchy Reservoir is one of the major reservoirs upstream of Don Pedro on the Tuolumne River, and that the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission operates that reservoir, but is physically and institutionally intertwined with the Turlock and Modesto irrigation districts. And also that Hetch Hetchy Valley was the one time in our nation's history that we dammed one of our national parks for water supply and drowned a valley, very much like Yosemite Valley. Our group is dedicated to returning that valley to its natural splendor while protecting the water and power needs of all the communities that rely on the Tuolumne River. Some of you that are on this call I've met and talked to, others I haven't. We believe that there's a role for improved groundwater management and especially groundwater recharge with some of San Francisco's supplies to develop a solution that will allow the restoration of Hetch Hetchy, and that solution can provide benefits to the Turlock Modesto areas as well. It's, as I'm sure you're all aware, it's politically challenging, it's economically challenging. The districts have got decent relations with folks at some of the districts, more so Turlock and San Francisco these days than Modesto. Nobody there is on board with restoring the valley, but we're out there looking for solutions. So I've been sort of lurking around the edges of this group and other groups trying to figure out how to make something happen, and always willing to talk with anybody who may be interested. Anyway, thanks very much for your time. I'm done.
Thank you.
Thank you, Spreck.
Is there anybody else who'd like to make a comment? Okay, hearing nobody else for public comment, we'll move on to item number 6, which is the budget. Budget update. We'll start with Michael Clipper, the treasurer of the West Turlock GSA.
Hello, everyone. And tonight, in the board meeting later on, I'll have all of these illustrated, you'll be able to see the same thing. So for the West Turlock budget, or the account ending April 30th, we had $131,539.30. Very little activity for the month due to everything that's happening. Any questions? If you want to go down to the next page, Herb, you can kind of so then that's the year-to-date activity. So then moving on to the basin account, at the end of April 30th, we had $865,070.15 for the month end for the basin account. And then as you can see, scrolling down, so then that's the statement from F&M for the month of April. Mostly these were going to Todd groundwater. And then that's the year-to-date activity for the basin account. Any questions?
No questions for Michael? Thank you, Michael. Kevin?
Thank you.
Kevin,
I'll
have a-
report for the east side. I guess I'll ask Michael a question. Michael, are we current? Is the East Turlock Subbasin GSA current?
Yes.
Okay, super.
Yes. Yeah, and then we'll probably send out up for the next 5 weeks. And then I'm going to send out invoices coming up in July.
Okay. As we have one alternate board member on the line, at least, I won't mention anything about being delinquent. We had our JPA board meeting this morning. Karen did the report on the status of our budget, and we're going to get through the year, but we overspent a little bit, so we're dipping into our contingency, and we also the board considered a budget for the coming year beginning July 1, and they approved that budget, which includes the payments to the joint accounts that Michael just reviewed. So that's all I had to report, unless I left something out, Dennis or Walt or whoever was at the board meeting this morning.
Sounds good. Thank you, Kevin.
You bet.
So now we'll go on to item number 7. This is the Proposition 68 grant update. This is an update on our round 3 grant award, and Debbie Liebersbach will lead us in this one.
Thank you, Lacey. So this is Debbie Liebersbach, and I am happy to report that we do have an approved agreement with DWR. It's an amendment to our round 2 funding grant agreement to authorize the implementation of not only the existing round 2 grant, but also the round 3 grant award that we recently received. So so we do have a fully executed amended agreement to be able to move forward with the round 3 grant projects. And so the next step negotiated with the consultants to move that project forward, being as though the other alternative would be to set up a separate meeting, perhaps if on what decisions are made with respect to the purchasing process. And so to move that project forward, we added that as an option for the board to consider this evening as well. And then that would facilitate moving that one project forward a little faster as we consider kind of how best to manage this process. So that's what I have as far as an update. So we're moving forward, and there'll be more information to come. Any questions?
This is Kevin, Debbie. A quick question. Have you had any communication with the subcontractor, if you will, that's going to be doing the, can't remember the name of the company, groundwater guy that's doing the tool that we're going to use for predicting where recharge will be done?
That's the groundwater recharge assessment tool that I was talking about.
Right.
Yeah, so there has been a little bit of conversation. We have some, we had some initial looks as far as agreements and what have you, and there's more work to be done there. And so that's why we have included on the West Turlock's agenda for this evening, kind of that approval to sign a contract once it's underway. And then that will move us, I think, forward more quickly. And the consultants, Sustainable Conservation and Earth Genome seem excited about that. But there's, like I said, there's some additional work to do on contracting and what have you. And until we have a purchasing process, we can't move that forward. And so we're kind of negotiating that process.
That's all I needed. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Debbie, forgive me, this is John Lambie, ePure. But I'm curious, the question sort of similar is with the programmatic EIR that was in the grant scope, that is a new vendor. How will they be contracted?
Again, until we have the purchasing process, I can't tell you for sure. The idea is to use the TID's existing purchasing process with some clarifications with respect to amounts authorized and what have you. And we're giving the board some options with respect to what to, what path to choose with respect to that. And so until we know more, I can't give specifics.
Very good, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions for Debbie? All righty, thank you, Debbie. Next, we're moving on to item number 8, and this is a continuance of our discussion on sustainable management criteria, the chronic lowering of groundwater levels and the reduction of groundwater storage. And we have Phyllis Stannon on the line with Todd Groundwater to help lead us through this conversation. So Phyllis, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you very much, Lacey. It's nice to hear everyone again. Today we'll be continuing some technical discussions on the GSP, including sustainable management criteria. And I am being told that Herb is not giving me his slide, his screen, so maybe you can just be the Vanna White for me there, Herb, and go to the next slide. So this is item number 8, and we're continuing our discussion for the chronic lowering of water levels and the reduction of groundwater and storage. Next slide, please. We've talked a lot so far. We've talked about what chronic lowering of water level and that sustainability indicator kind of means to us. We've talked about impacts to wells, and we've listed beneficial uses in our subbasin and the wells that are associated with those beneficial uses. We've talked about adverse impacts to water supply wells that have been related to these historic low water levels, and we're doing that to try to get some kind of an understanding of what we might identify to be our undesirable results. Once we have defined which of these are undesirable results, this will help us select our sustainable management criteria, which includes some minimum thresholds. We've also discussed how could these impacts be managed or mitigated so that we're not setting minimum thresholds that are responsive to something that we are able to mitigate through groundwater management processes. Next slide, please, Herb. And one of the things that we've covered are potentially impacted domestic wells. And we've used the recent drought of record to help us understand what those impacts might be. We did have some information from Stanislaus and Merced County on domestic well failures that occurred during the recent drought. This was the time period 2015 to 2016. And those locations of well failures as mapped by the counties are shown on the map at left by those X's. So you can see the X's of the areas that had reported to the counties that they were having difficulty with their domestic wells. We're also showing on this map a representation of a minimum low that has occurred during an even longer time period than the 2015-16. We looked at a time period between 2013 to 2018 to get some kind of an understanding about if we had minimum thresholds at historic low water levels, what additional impacts might we be seeing. And that analysis has indicated that there might be a handful of additional domestic wells that would be actually dry, associated with the historic low water levels. And those are shown by the 6 green dots that are on this map. Again, this map is the historic low elevations. Those yellow colors are the lowest elevations in the subbasin, and then that transitions through reds and pinks for the higher elevations. So you can see that most of the impacts to the domestic wells are in the areas that are sort of the central portion of the subbasin. We would think that some of these wells might have already been mitigated since they've already gone through these low water levels. I would think that if you had a domestic well that had seen these low water levels, perhaps there would be mitigation that you would already have done as a homeowner. But we do think that if water levels are allowed to continue to decline, that additional wells could be put into jeopardy. There are really no significant domestic well issues in the East Turlock Subbasin GSA, but we do see an indication from this map and also more prominently from other maps that the expanding cone of depression that's there has impacted some of the wells in the West Turlock Subbasin. So I think we're sort of seeing that we're all in this together. The joint tax also suggested that there were adverse impacts to municipal and small water system wells, in addition to just domestic wells with these recent low water levels that we've been seeing in the basin. This was all sort of pointing us in the direction of the potential for minimum thresholds associated at or above these historic low water levels that we've seen in the subbasin. But if we'll go to the next slide, we also had input and discussion among the TAC members that we really are looking for a balance of the beneficial uses of the wells and declining water levels in the basin, whereby we protect, of course, the beneficial uses of water supply wells, and at the same time allow our irrigation pumpers to lower water levels, especially during drought conditions when surface water's supplies are really not available. And so I think that overall, the input that we've had from the joint tax is that we'd like to see an optimization of groundwater resources in this subbasin. It brings up the possibility for mitigation programs for some of the water supply wells that have had adverse impacts. We have a long list that has been provided of adverse impacts from the agencies, including collapsed casing, loss of capacity, dried up irrigation wells, many wells interfering with domestic wells. So we've had a lot of discussion about that. There's also been some discussion about, as water levels have lowered in some municipal wells, we've seen water quality impacts. And then of course the issue of the shallow domestic wells, which we've just talked about. Next slide, please, Herb. Some of the actions that the agencies and others have suggested that they have incorporated during the drought of record included the new or replacement or deepening of wells. The counties had both a trucked water program and water tanks provided to assist others, as well as financial incentives. The Delhi County Water District had a domestic well program to assist some homeowners with their well issues. And then the city of Modesto pointed out that they had done some redistribution of pumping and decreasing of some pumping rates to improve their water quality. So we see some of these management actions that are potentially assisting the small community water systems and domestic wells and municipal wells. And we'll want to consider those again for potential incorporation into the next phase of the project when we evaluate the projects and management actions. In addition to all of these adverse impacts that we have discussed about the wells, the regulations also require that minimum thresholds also consider some additional technical analysis. And I've summarized that on this next slide. You can go to the next one there. Thanks. So the GSP regulations specifically require that the minimum thresholds that are set for the chronic lowering of water levels are supported by some analyses, including a rate of groundwater elevation decline. We've talked about this in the past. I have just 3 example hydrographs that are pulled from each of the principal aquifers, illustrating the changes in groundwater elevation decline over times in the subbasin. And you can see at the bottom there in red where we have some wells that are actually in the western portion of the subbasin, especially in the upper aquifer, that have relatively high water levels and no real decline over time. Whereas as we move both to the western lower principal aquifer and also in the eastern principal aquifer, we have seen water level declines. The analysis also suggests that a consideration be given to water year type. I don't think it's a surprise to anyone that water levels go down during drought conditions. And so there needs to be a consideration of when water levels decline and under what conditions. And importantly for this discussion, I wanted to bring up that the regulations also require that these be supported by a projected water use in the basin. And that's something that we're just beginning to analyze in this subbasin. So I wanted to spend just a little bit of time talking about the need for projected water budgets. And if we can go to the next slide, we see that we have looked at water budgets using the Turlock subbasin model already. And we've determined that over the historical study period, which included 26-year period, looking at current and historical conditions, that we did have subbasin overdraft indicated for those average hydrologic conditions. But what's becoming more important, I think, is what is our target for sustainable management in the future? Are things getting better or worse, and where and how? And in some ways, I think that our discussion of sustainable management criteria would really be assisted with a more appropriate sustainable yield analysis that we're planning to introduce anyway for planning purposes for the GSP. And I think it would sort of inform what we've been talking about now. And if we can go to the next slide, I can discuss a little bit more about what that means. So the reason that I've combined some of our discussions using 2 sustainability indicators, water levels and storage, is that really those indicators are closely linked. They're not only linked from a hydrogeological perspective, but the regulations and the Sigma law also recognizes the linkage between the 2. I have just one quote there from Sigma that talks about overdraft and how to define it, and it's specifically related to a certain condition in a period of drought. But the real reason that I've put the quote on this line, on this slide, is to highlight what I've underlined there, that there's this linkage between the reduction of levels and the reductions of storage in a subbasin that I think are helpful to consider together. Obviously, we're going to need to arrest the water level declines in order to achieve a sustainable yield within the 20-year time period, which is our sustainability goal and also required by the regulations. But it seems to me that in order to do that, it would be helpful if we better defined what the sustainable yield actually is for the subbasin, and specifically looking at projected future conditions. And so if you can go to the next slide, we'll talk a little bit more about that. So defining the sustainable yield, the sustainable yield of the subbasin is not as straightforward as one might think. We already have the historical water budgets. They provide some indication of sort of where we've been and how we got here. But the sustainable yield going forward is actually subject to interpretation, and there's really an approach that needs to be incorporated into the process and input from all of the GSA and Joint TAC members. Because sustainable yield is not just one number. A sustainable yield will change with land use. It changes with a variety of other water uses within the basin. And it also changes with factors that have nothing to do with current and local water use, such as conditions in the adjacent subbasins. So I'm recommending that we, on a parallel track with defining our sustainable management criteria, that we move forward with the sustainable yield analysis and look at these future conditions. They're required, of course, for the GSP process anyway, and we now have a well-calibrated model to be able to proceed with that effort. I didn't talk a lot when we had the water budget diagram up just a minute ago, but we have now revised that water budget for the subbasin a bit because we are also modeling the Modesto subbasin to the north of us. The Merced subbasin to the south of us has already gone through their GSP process because they were critically overdrafted. And so now we have the opportunity to really have, a knowledge on all sides of our river boundaries of our subbasin. And by putting together the model in the Modesto subbasin and coordinating with them, we were able to really get a good handle on what's going on with respect to the Tuolumne River and our river boundary, and not only aquifer stream interaction, but subsurface flows between the subbasins. So we feel like that we have a model now that's well calibrated to proceed with developing the sustainable yield analysis that I'm recommending that we sort of push forward on a priority basis. And if we go to the next slide, you can see actual recommendations that I have in order to complete that. So I think that we could discuss the approach. We could be ready to do that by the June 11th TAC special meeting. We'll be working with TAC members to, because we will want to get information on projected plans that agencies might have. We'll be looking at agricultural water management plans and urban water management plans to be able to better understand what future projected conditions might be. And I think that if the TAC members are willing to work with us directly on a sort of one-on-one basis for certain local areas in the subbasin, then that would be very helpful for putting together an appropriate approach. We do have requirements from the GSP regulations with respect to how to develop these future projected conditions, and we'll want to communicate those to the TAC members as a reminder to just make sure that we're all moving forward in one path. And we also have some future projections for the Turlock subbasin and some strategies for analyzing the sustainable yield that we'll want to share with everyone and make sure, again, that we're all on the same page with how we proceed with the analysis. If we are moving forward very efficiently and quite aggressively with this, I think that we could even have some preliminary results to share with the TAC members at the special meeting on July 9th. So pulling this together in parallel while we continue to think of and work on sustainable management criteria, I think will be a big help. I think that one of the things that we've seen after several months of discussion of the sustainable management criteria is that it's such an interactive process. You can think about one sustainability indicator singularly, and then you begin to say, well, this is related so much to the other sustainability indicators. So I think that it is a little bit of a iterative approach whereby you look at one and then you consider how that impacts the other. And that's a little bit what we're doing here. We have talked a lot about chronic lowering of water levels, but I think if we pull everything into a sustainable yield context, things will get a little more straightforward. And I know that there's been some concern that we're going over the details of this over several months, and we're still in the process of developing this, but it takes time, and these are new terms and new concepts. And I think it's appropriate for the GSAs to move in a reasoned way and consider the impacts of all of the information that's coming at them. So this is my sort of way forward, in addition to paralleling that with more discussions on sustainable management criteria. But I think we're at a place now where we have investigated the concepts of the chronic lowering of water level. And I think if we begin to put this into a sustainable yield context, we'll have a lot more clarity as to how to move the ball forward. And that's the presentation that I have for you today. And I'm more than happy to take any input from anyone who would like to give it. And in particular, if there are TAC members that have comments on this sort of parallel track that I'm proposing, would love to get your input at this time. So I'll turn it kind of back over to Lacey and like to hear any questions or input that anybody might have.
Thank you, Phyllis. Does anybody have any comments or questions on the parallel track, sustainable yield, future conditions?
Kevin, I can start it off if you'd like. Is here. Phyllis, great presentation, first of all. The thing that I saw missing just came to mind because of something you said, looking at, you know, sustainable yield. When you go that route, you can't just look at the period of time that we're analyzing between 2001 and 1999 and 2015. You've got to look at a much longer period to try to determine where equalization may have occurred in the past or where it could occur in the future. How would you describe that as a groundwater hydrologist?
Well, we do have a 25-year period right now of hydrologic conditions, but we have to, by the regulations, look at a 50-year period going forward. So there is going to be a tremendous amount of variability in the hydrology that will be incorporated into the sustainable yield analysis over a 50-year period. So if anything changes during that period, you know, we would be able to pull that out. I think part of the process of developing these projected water budget, and I'll call them baselines, because really these are setting up some baseline conditions in the future, and they will sort of provide us with some targets in terms of what to strive for in order to fix. If we have overdraft conditions indicated by the model over a 50-year period going into the future, then that will be our target for our projects. That will be what we will want to try to mitigate and avoid. That will be our better understanding of sort of where we need to head. It's instructive to have seen the past, but it is the future projected analysis will incorporate the past hydrology and will even be a much longer and wider variability and time frame than we have looked at for the historical time period. I'm sort of I think answering around your question.
Right,
did I hit?
Let me just pry a little bit more.
Yeah.
If in the Eastern San Joaquin Basin, and maybe Walt's seen this in some of the meetings he's attended there, what they looked at is, you know, the 50-year period, but what they're seeing is that, yeah, it's dropping low, but the trend lines are not really dropping, continuing to drop like some of the graphs that you showed in the wells that you looked at in your presentation here, that there's actually a more stable trend line. And I'm just wondering if you're going to be able to identify that so that not everything is, you know, and I'm focusing on the eastern part of the basin, of course, but I'm just looking for a definition of not so much stability, but when you're looking at yield, if there's a stable number there, that it's operating within a stable range.
And that will absolutely be indicated by the hydrographs as we move it forward. So okay. if we get into a period where the cone is expanded to the point where you know, everything is beginning to equilibrate because the cone is wide enough to take in enough water, then we will see that stabilization in the water levels. You will always see a little bit of stabilization of any decline during wet periods. And so the overall trend is really what you're looking for. There are always going to be peaks and valleys along the way associated with hydrology. That's why it's important to come up with average hydrologic conditions. I think that, so many people look at a trend line and they go, well, look, it's going down, so therefore that's overdraft. And you can't really do that. Any time period that I might select, if I select the beginning of that time period to be wet and the end of that time period to be dry, then water levels would probably decline overall on a cumulative basis. What we're really looking for, however, is what's happening on an average annual condition for average hydrologic conditions. So, the time period is important, and we need very much to make sure that it's representative of average hydrologic conditions. And frankly, I think that was part of the process for the regulations identifying 50 years. I think all of the hydrogeologists saw 50 years of future projections, and we thought, oh my gosh, that's going to be tough to do. But I think that after seeing the process work in the critically overdrafted basins, it's helpful to go out that kind of time, because then you do have that hydrologic variability that you're talking about. And if you can get average hydrologic conditions and see what's happening on an average annual basis, that's a lot more informative than trying to just look at cumulative plots on a water budget. That may be describing curves that aren't up and they're in my head rather than for you to actually see what I mean. But do you kind of get what I'm trying to say there?
Absolutely. No, that's much more clear for me. Thank you. No,
Thank you. Any other comments from anyone?
So Phyllis, this is Lacey. It sounds like the member agencies might have a little bit of homework too in anticipation of hearing from you. You had talked about working with the agencies as you're putting together these projected conditions and the sustainable yield, and trying to get some information from the member agencies about their anticipated future conditions or future uses. So is this like water use, population growth, cropping patterns? Is that the type of information you're going to be reaching out to the member agencies looking for?
Yes, Lacey, thank you. This gives me the opportunity to suggest that the modeling team and I will work on, it won't be a data request list per se, but it will be something that will provide some information to the TAC members on the types of things, the types of decisions that need to be made to lay out the 50-year time period. I think we have an obligation to propose to the TAC members what that 50-year might look like, and then allow everyone the opportunity to say what they think projected, reasonable projected conditions might be for each one of these areas. Again, relying on some of the planning documents initially, and then if agencies can look this over and give us more specific information that they would like to see developed for these baselines, then that would be great. And I also think that we owe the TAC members a little bit of a written product to help them better understand how we're setting this up with respect to the GSP regulations that require certain things to occur. For example, there will actually be 3 baselines developed by the model. These baselines will be sort of based on current conditions moving forward. Another one will be based on DWR guidance for a climate change scenario. There are 2 of those. So we would have 1 regular baseline for projected conditions and then 2 climate change scenario baselines. And the results of these baselines, again, the point of them is to provide us with a better understanding of projects and management actions that we might need to achieve the sustainable yields that we develop using these projected future baselines coming out of the model. So it's a little bit of again, an interactive process, working with the TAC members, but we anticipate trying to get something together. I've been working with the modeling team on what this written product might look like. It probably won't be a formal memorandum as much as it will be a summary sheet that has where we're headed and the types of decisions that need to be made to put together an approach for the projected baseline. So sort of stay tuned. Some written product would be coming from the technical team if everybody agrees that we should move forward on this right away.
Okay, so we can anticipate getting a written product from you and perhaps being in touch with you about some of that information that you're looking for. And are you also looking for a nod from the TAC to move in this direction, this parallel path of putting together sustainable yield and projected future conditions along with our conversations about sustainable management criteria? Is that what you're looking for?
Yeah, I mean, today I was hoping to be able to explain to everyone how we think that doing these parallel might actually one analysis assist the other. I feel like that after several months of discussion of the sustainable management criteria, I don't want to say that we're stalled a bit, but I think that it would be helpful to the group. I'm just trying to see what might be most helpful with respect to moving the ball forward on that. And it seems to me that even though the projected water budgets and the projects, I think, more organically go together, that we should certainly begin on the projected water budgets now to assist this process as well. So I guess, you know, I don't know that I need a formal vote or anything. This is something that we have to do, and it's just a matter of moving it up a bit. But I think it would help the process is mainly my point. And I was really just seeking input from the TAC members if they have any.
Yeah. Are there any other TAC members that have thoughts on this?
Hey, Lacey, can you hear me?
Yeah, I heard somebody. Who was that?
It's Michael Cook.
Oh, hey, Michael.
I think this makes sense. I know I've been missing for a while, but having some type of objective criteria or quantitative criteria gives us something to aim for. Right now, I've been dealing more with qualitative or somewhat subjective goals and objectives. I think it's always good to have some numbers and some data and something to aim for and see what we get from that and how we put that together for the plans. But I think it's a good idea, and appreciate Phyllis bringing this forward.
Thank you, Michael. That's exactly what I was thinking.
John Lambie here. You all can hear me. I'm taking myself off mute.
Yes.
Hey. Well, first off, the baseline sort of conditions you described, I want to make sure of one thing is the land uses remain status quo. They are what they were in 2015 is what you're going to use. Is that right?
So we will take a look at that, John. Yes, we need one of the baselines to use current land use, but if 2015 was such a drought year, if we had excessive fallowing that year, I'm not sure that we did, but I'd just like to take a look at that before I commit to a certain year. I think the modeling team is already looking into what would be representative, but something current, something recent with respect to a time frame.
Right, and that would be applied to this sort of 50-year classic hydrology versus the two hydrologies you mentioned of climate change 1 and climate change 2, right?
That's correct. That's
correct.
Make
sure I'm
that's
understanding.
exactly. Yes, that's correct.
Okay, and then we get into some of the nuances about sustainability and such, are first the river hydrologies. Are you thinking there'll be some modifications to those based on either past conditions or anticipated future conditions in terms of how much water is released to the Tuolumne or the Merced from?
There won't be any, there probably won't be any changes in that historical use for the regular baseline, but there may be some adjustments that would have to be done under the climate change scenarios. And again, I don't have specifics today to help you on that, but I can imagine that that's part of what we will be incorporating when we use the DWR guidance on that.
Oh, sure. And because, I mean, in its simplest definition, sustainable yield, as you said, is a policy choice because you're looking at how much of the natural discharge that would occur are you going to allow to be captured by extraction for water use within a basin. And so captured induced recharge and captured discharge in the net, if those are equal, you're not then big picture changing the storage. It sort of amounts to what you said one way and Kevin said another, that the water levels, while they're down and might continue downward, will eventually have to plateau where that captured recharge and discharge come into equilibrium. Otherwise, you keep drawing down storage. So it does make sense, I guess, a simple answer to your question, to look at both the chronic lowering of water levels and the sustainable yield at the same time. Because those two, that's essentially where they're intricately related. And it's that, to me, it's that policy decision of how much captured recharge, captured discharge are you going to deal with. And that's not for me to determine. There's just technical information there. But one of the technical pieces that matters to the underpinning is that there is riverine discharge now to the aquifers that, as we learned collectively last week, is changed into the very recent history, as in when Sigma cut in 2015. Is that going to be the baseline sort of recharge discharge relationship that you're going to start working forward from?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, generally. And again, I don't want to promise a certain specific water year. We need to get something that's representative of what we're looking at now. But it is under current conditions. It's not historical.
Got it. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
It's sort of it's a little more, trying to be a little more simply put, it's the current land use practices and the current management practices superimposed on historical hydrology. And when I say historical hydrology, I don't mean historical releases and diversions, which are current management practices. So the hydrology is simply, how much it rains and what sort of runoff is anticipated with that rain. But superimposed on top of that hydrology would be current water management practices.
Okay.
Sounds like we have several of the TAC members who are agreeing with this approach. Is there anybody out there who is not comfortable with this approach, any of the TAC members? Okay. I do want to just give the public a chance. Is there anybody from the public who has any comments on this discussion? Okay. So Phyllis, it sounds like we have a little bit of direction for you to move forward with the sustainable yield and the projected conditions. We've got a little bit of work for the member agencies to pull together some information and get that to you hopefully soon. Is there anything else that you have for this one?
No, that's all. Thank you, Lacey. We'll be reaching out very soon with some written general guidance, and that would be the first step in this process.
Okay, great. Thank you, Phyllis. So we'll go on to item number 9. So number 9 on our agenda is consideration of the seawater intrusion sustainability indicator. So if the TAC members remember, at the last meeting in April, we had seen we had discussion about a memo from Todd Groundwater on the seawater intrusion sustainability indicator. We were going to make some revisions to that member and return that back to the TAC members for their review and then for action today. We have not sent that memo out to the TAC members, and so what I'm suggesting is that we table this conversation and this action on the seawater intrusion sustainability indicator to our next meeting, which will give us some time to get that memo and the revisions out to all the TAC members for review before, and then we can have the discussion and the action at the same time at the next meeting. Is anybody opposed to tabling this item at this time and having that conversation next time? Or do you want to have a conversation on seawater intrusion today, but knowing that it is going to come up again at the next meeting, because we do have to approve the memo?
Lacey, this is Curtis. I'm okay with that. Do you need a motion to move that forward properly?
Valerie.
No, if it's a non-action, you can just table it. You don't have to have a specific action tabling it. I would just say that you don't take the action to approve it.
Okay. Is everybody else good with that?
I don't hear any objection. Kevin's in agreement.
Great, thanks, Kevin. Okay, so we'll move on and we'll talk about the seawater intrusion memo at the next meeting. And speaking of the next meeting, on to number 10, this is June and July special GSA TAC meetings. And so we have identified a couple of special meetings on June 11th and July 9th. So these are 2 weeks, every 2 weeks in between our regularly scheduled TAC meetings on a Thursday, to help us work through some of these technical issues of the sustainable yield, the future conditions, and the sustainable management criteria. We recognize that there's a lot of work that has to be done, and we want to stay on our original GSP development schedule that Phyllis has presented to us before. And so we've identified these days in between to have a couple special meetings. I would say we probably could have special meetings after this, but they're not scheduled at this time. And if they're not necessary, we're not looking to pull people together for additional meetings if we don't have to. We just want to stay on schedule and get through some of these heavier, more technical topics. And so we're looking for action to approve holding special meetings, one on Thursday, June 11th, and one on Thursday, July 9th for special TAC meetings. Is there any discussion on this?
Lacey, is the plan to offer these meetings virtually like we've been doing, in person, both?
That's a good question. I would anticipate for the June meeting, since it's just a couple weeks away, I would anticipate it would also be a teleconference meeting like this one. July, I don't know. Golly, I just don't know if I could say for certain that we would be able to have an in-person meeting at that time, or if we're still going to be under some of these stay-at-home orders. I think it depends on some of the orders coming from our counties, the stay-at-home orders coming from the state and the counties, as well as whether some of the agencies are even open and accepting members of the public to come in and have meetings. And so unless anybody else has further insight, Herb, do you have any thoughts on continuing these teleconference meetings?
I don't have anything necessarily to add. This is a procedure and practice in which we're getting more and more familiar with, in terms of running it. It's obviously not ideal. We all prefer in-person participation, with probably moving forward, probably try and have some sort of remote option for those who can't attend, because it does broaden interest. But I like, restaurants are opening, and a lot of places tend to be opening now with various restrictions. It's too early to tell when that could occur for us. I know specifically, because I'm a TID employee, I could share that, our facility as a whole, there's been a plan being developed for TID activities to begin. And I know that TID as a location is where we tend to hold a lot of groundwater meetings. And so I would assume, I don't think I'm out of line in saying that the same rules that are getting implemented for TID as an agency itself would probably be extended to agencies in which TID allows or lets host meetings there. And it's just too early to tell when it comes to that, but that's something that could definitely be looked into further and see like what would be the conditions upon which that would occur.
Lacey, this is Kevin, and these will be at 2 o'clock. Is that correct?
Yes, I think we polled the TAC members to try to see who's available in the morning, who's available in the afternoon. But if 2 o'clock is the best time for everybody, since it's the regularly scheduled TAC time, then I would anticipate it would be at that time. I think we didn't put the time on the agenda because we just weren't sure what was the best time, morning or afternoon, for the majority of TAC members. Is there a motion to approve these meetings, these special meetings?
Sorry.
This is
Sorry, Lacey,
Curtis. I'll make a motion.
Sorry.
Karen from Series will second it.
Great. We have a motion from Curtis and a second from Karen to approve special TAC meetings to be held on July 11th or June 11th and July 9th. All in favor, say aye.
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 Anybody opposed? Okay, so we've got a couple of special TAC meetings scheduled, and we'll confirm the time with everybody as well. Next, we're moving right along to number 11, Sigma-related updates. We'll start with the update on the Modesto Subbasin GSA and the Turlock Subbasin GSA's coordination meeting with Debbie.
Lacey, could I interrupt this, Kevin?
Oh.
I was just wondering if the seawater intrusion memo could be out and maybe take action at the June 11th meeting.
Yes, I think that's what we were anticipating doing, but I'll double check with Phyllis. Is that correct, Phyllis? June 11th for the seawater intrusion?
Yeah, absolutely. The memo is ready now, and I can get it out to the TAC members within the day.
Super.
It just simply didn't get circulated this time. Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin.
You're welcome.
Hi, this is Debbie. Lacey, is there a need for East Turlock to take action on item number 10 before we move to number 11?
I'm gonna ask Valerie again. We've been taking action as joint TAC in the past. Since we're scheduling separate or approving separate meetings, do we need to approve a separate West TAC meeting and East Turlock TAC meeting individually?
Yeah, I would do that just to be cautious, because right now, to Debbie's point, I think that the West Turlock could meet and has set new meetings, and I think in an abundance of caution, the East Turlock should probably do the same, given that they're different bodies.
On that note, Dennis or Walt, would you be willing to make that motion?
I will, Dennis.
Okay.
I'll second.
Thank you, Dennis. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anybody against? Not hearing anybody against, the motion passes unanimously. Thank you all.
Thanks, Kevin, and thanks, Debbie, for catching that.
No worries. Thank you so much. Last week, the Turlock Subbasin and the Modesto Subbasins had their first coordinating meeting, and really the focus was kind of an update from our joint modeling teams and consultants to update us on where they are with the model. If you recall, our subbasin had its first look at what the model was indicating was our water budget information back in, I think, December. And we've talked a little more about that since, but they were still working at that time on the Modesto Subbasin and calibrating that portion of the model. And so they are very close to having the model completed. And so much of the coordinating meeting was focused around the model and what it appears to be indicating with respect to movement of water between subbasins and the rivers. And there was quite a bit of conversation regarding that. And there were a bunch of people at that coordinating meeting, so I wanted to kind of open it up for discussion amongst the folks that were there and kind of, you know, what their takeaways were from that meeting as well. And then the only other things I had listed specifically related to the discussion, we had some additional discussion on the possibility of coordinating monitoring well installation and use between the subbasins, a potential for looking at developing a memorandum of intent, similar to what was developed with our neighbors to the south, the Merced Subbasin. And we talked a little bit about opportunities for coordinating outreach and those types of things, as both the Modesto and the Turlock Subbasins are on the 2022 track. And so there's perhaps opportunities to coordinate some of that. And that's an item I think Herb will probably talk about next. So with that, it was our initial meeting. There's more to discuss, but I wanted to open up to the rest of the group and the people who were on that coordinating call.
John Lambie here, Debbie. You can hear me again?
Yes, thank you.
Sorry, I just have to check the mute buttons off. I thought it was a very good presentation, and some of you may know, particularly Debbie. I sort of ran through some of the data I had and the modeling team had to see how it was informing the river's relationship to the two subbasins. And I guess in short, I found it's doing an excellent job. It mimics the fact that heads around the reservoirs are above the river, and now heads, hydraulic heads, excuse me, west of the two reservoirs are now below the riverbed, at least as of 2015. Hence, the river is beginning to express discharge there. which is an important baseline understanding to have overall. So I was quite pleased to see that, you know, I always believe data rules over models, but it's awfully nice when a model honors the data. So well done.
Any other thoughts for those that were present? Or questions from those that weren't?
Hey, Debbie, this is Lacey. Has there been discussion of when we'd meet again with the Modesto Subbasin, either to work on some of these future coordination items and messaging, or a memorandum of intent to coordinate with them?
I don't recall there being a specific date identified. I think we were just gonna kind of see how things progressed. There was also, I think, some discussion about the need to coordinate with, once the model is completed, the need to coordinate with our neighbors to the west again, and there may be an opportunity to coordinate that as one meeting between the 3 subbasins, rather than having a separate meetings, because we're talking about the same model. So that might help save some funding and some time, perhaps. So there was that conversation, but no specific dates, unless I missed something, Phyllis.
We had thought that August, late summer, August might be an appropriate time to get back together again. The Modesto Subbasin is a little bit behind the Turlock Subbasin. I think you will have some projected future baseline information by then. And they are in the process now of QCing their model results. They are going to be meeting with the Eastern San Joaquin Subbasin shortly to do a similar coordination meeting that they have done with the Turlock Subbasin. And then they will be moving toward doing some zone budgets. So they're still working on the historical piece of the model, and the Turlock Subbasin has completed their historical piece, and as we discussed today, has moved to sustainable management criteria and the projection. So we're still a little bit ahead of Modesto, but I think that when we get to a place in Modesto where the historical information has been finalized and they are beginning the sustainable management criteria discussions, that would be an excellent time for us to circle back around with our sustainable management criteria and coordinate with a discussion on that. So that seems reasonable to me, that we need a couple more months to let the Modesto Subbasin finish up their historical analysis and get themselves prepared for sustainable management criteria.
Thank you for correcting me, Phyllis. Appreciate that.
No, it's not a correction. We didn't, you're right. We really didn't identify any kind of a date or any kind of, we just began to talk about late summer. And I think just because we're doing the modeling in the Modesto Subbasin, as you know, we were thinking in terms of what the next time frame might be with respect to coordination. So it could be that it wasn't discussed in the meeting at all. And that's just what I think Modesto is thinking about.
Either way, that sounds great. Thank you so much. Any other thoughts? And if not, I will turn it over to Herb.
Okay, I'll just jump right on in. I just have a couple quick slides real quick. Before I get to them though, just 3 pieces of information related to what's been discussed. First and foremost, the coordination meeting with the Modesto Subbasin that Debbie just mentioned has, on top of the agenda, there's also a video or an audio recording of the meeting or the Zoom call, and the presentation given during the meeting is located on turlockgroundwater.org. So if you're looking for that, or if, as Debbie mentioned, those who weren't in attendance, if you're interested in hearing that or seeing the presentation, that's available for you. Secondly, the presentation that Phyllis presented today is now available on turlockgroundwater.org. I posted that on the event page that has this this TAC meeting. So that is there for anyone to view in PDF form. And then lastly, it was mentioned a little bit earlier, I just want to put a plug that the West Turlock Subbasin GSA Board of Directors, upon which the presentation I'm about ready to present, I'm going to give to them tonight too. They meet tonight at 5 p.m. And it's a Zoom webinar, a Zoom call, similar to this. So if you're interested in joining that, feel free and go on to our website and you can click on the agenda and listen to West Turlock Subbasin GSA activities. We continue to put agendas for that GSA as well as the East Turlock Subbasin, who met earlier today, on turlockgroundwater.org. So with that, I'm just going to share a few slides here. This presentation I put together is intended to be a static presentation minus some metric changes that I give as an outreach update, hopefully with some additions through the remainder of the GSP process as far as outreach. And so we'll continue to improve it, but this is the first such presentation. So I'm going to go through this pretty quick. So one of the areas in which we do outreach is turlockgroundwater.org. You see some of the facts there. It was originally launched in 2017. The version that exists at current was upgraded earlier this year. You see some page views. You see our more popular pages there on the right. Probably no surprise to people that, you know, home and the events page that has our meetings and agendas are probably the more frequented pages for this period of the past month that you see there. We have it's interactive. We have a splash screen that asks for people's emails so they can get on our interested parties list. You know, we have a get involved screen that does that as well, to where people can sign up. There's a green top banner that we could employ for various, you know, newsy type items. And then of course, feedback's always welcome. We are happy to take feedback in these meetings. And also we have a contact us form where we could take feedback on the site itself. So that's one area of outreach. Also, we have an interested parties list. You know, we began emailing back in January of 2019. We've sent 38 emails to a current of 284 or so subscribers. Generally, we have newsletters similar to the one you see kind of screenshotted at the right, with news and notices and things like that. And then we also have meeting notices that we send out as well when we get those out. So we continue to send that out. If anybody's interested in getting the most current information in Turlock Groundwater, it's going to be signing up for that. So feel free and pass that along. This presentation here is for the GSA board tonight. So, you know, there's a little different for this meeting, but these are the meetings we've held since the last GSA meeting for the West Turlock Subbasin, which was in February. It's just a list of the number of participants we've had, types of meetings, and then you see at the bottom there, you know, we've been talking about ways in this pandemic to have virtual community meetings. We've been working with our consultant and their sub-consultants to try and find a way to do that. And there's a couple different forums we could use. And so we're pondering that actually right now. So stay tuned for that. It's possible we could have a specific outreach meeting or community meeting virtually as we move forward. Social media, we have, you know, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube pages. You see a screenshot there on the right of the Sigma in the Turlock Subbasin video that's on our YouTube page. It's a very informative 5-minute video that in English and Spanish that describes what's going on. And we also have a little 30-second video that shows people how to sign up for our interested parties list, kind of, you know, quick 3-step process. And we have some board meeting videos up there when we were meeting in person. Other resources we have a fact sheet and a bill insert that are physical, digital and physical items that we have on our website. We wrapped up a bill insert, which is, you see a small piece of that on the left item, front and back, English and Spanish, we have that in. We have a bill insert that's available for all member agencies of the East and West Turlock Subbasin GSAs to send to their respective constituents, however they see fit. They can keep them in their offices. They can send them out in bills. They can stuff bills with them. And so we've provided that, and we created that this past year. And then the right portion is the backside of our fact sheet. Both of these are available on the resources tab on turlockgroundwater.org. And as we do other materials, we'll continue to update this presentation. We talk a lot about outreach, but I think it's important every time we give an outreach presentation to talk about what I call in-reach. Anytime people reach out to us with some good ideas. And what I have here is, we received, the TAC received some recommendations from the Leadership Council for Justice and Accountability last month. They've been involved in a lot of GSP development up and down the valley, and they've been at a few of our meetings as well. And you see here a quote, that they're giving some recommendations for how to be transparent during the COVID pandemic. And so they actually gave us a little bit of a nod, thanking us that our Zoom meetings have been pretty good models. So that's nice. However, they do have a few recommendations, which I list 3 of them there, which are very good recommendations that we're chewing on at the TAC level to determine how we can continue to amplify the transparency that we have under SGMA and go beyond what's stated in the law wherever possible. So that's something that we received in April of this year, last month. And so we're continuing to just do that. And as we get recommendations, we're going to try and let those be known because we always try and improve. Okay, moving on to my next slide. It's just, these are the channels we have. We're always encouraging people to share on social media what we're doing. And then being that this is I'm going to ask the same question of the West Turlock Subbasin Board tonight, but being that this is kind of a general presentation that I'll update in those various areas where you see headings. I just ask right now, it's really the turn, the TAC and the public, if there's any areas that could be explored, that should be explored, if there's any recommendations for how to continually add sections to this presentation, as I plan at every meeting of the TAC or of the West Turlock Subbasin to share what's been going on with kind of this in mind as a template. And then if there's any other recommendations you have. And I believe that is my last slide. And so I'll just stop there, see if there's any questions, recommendations that you may have. Always a good sign. Of course, TAC members, myself, if anything comes up, any ways people think outreach can be expanded, we're always, happy to discuss it, always happy to receive feedback, and always happy to explore different areas to amplify what we do. So happy to take those offline as well, but I wanted to provide the option here. So if there are no questions or thoughts, I will hand it back over to Lacey.
Great, thank you, Herb. For the other agencies, are there any other SGMA related updates anybody wants to share?
Yeah, this is Phil with CID. Lacey, I just had a quick question. I was listening to Phyllis's presentation, and she mentioned well-calibrated model a couple times, and it reminded me that we had put out a request, I think, for feedback or comments on the model. Kind of lost track of that. I think we had a deadline, which is come and gone, but anyway, I kind of like to see that brought back up, and I think we were headed towards bringing the model, to a future TAC meeting for discussion, or just kind of acknowledge that, okay, it's calibrated and available for use by any of the member agencies. Could you, does that ring a bell?
Maybe let's bring Phyllis into this conversation as well. I don't know if Phyllis received any comments on the model. Phyllis, did you hear the question?
I
did you
did.
receive
I
any
did.
comments? Are you open for comments? And I guess the other part is the model going to be available to any of the member agencies Phil, are you looking for like individual use? Is that what you're asking about?
Well, yeah, I mean, everyone every member agency, right, has contributed towards the development of the model, so it kind of belongs to everybody.
Absolutely, but we would ask very kindly if we could please get through the projected water budget process. I mean, one of the things that we're going to need to do is to have the ability to tweak as we go. We have a well-calibrated model. We feel good about it, and it could be that there's nothing more that will be done. But anytime you set these new scenarios up, you may identify a new issue or a new section of the model that needs a little bit of tweaking or adjustments. The other thing too is that we have a very aggressive schedule, and we need very much to get the modeling team focused on moving all of this forward. The integrated model is a IWFM surface water groundwater model, and unless those out there who have done a lot of C2V sim work in the past would need quite a bit of coaching and question and answer from the modeling team with respect to how best to interpret the input files or how to change them. This is not your typical sort of mod flow model with easy post and pre-post processing. I'm not trying to keep the model away from anyone that feels like that it would be helpful for use, but I am very protective of the technical team's time and focus and energies with respect to getting done what we need to get done. So those are my initial concerns, and I'm not sure I can offer much more than that. Does that make sense?
Phyllis, have you received, I think we did talk about the model, I can't remember when it was, if it was early this year, late last year. Did you receive comments from any of the TAC members that that we should discuss at a future meeting?
I think that the East Turlock Subbasin GSA consultant provided some input with regard to the water budget process. I think it was more clarifying comments than suggested changes to the model. So I don't think we've had any other comments at all related to the model other than those.
If I may, that was me, John Lambie, that provided those, and I gave them to the team, the Todd team, in the context of, as you do these projected future water budgets, could you have a look at these things that I have questions on? So they're written out in correspondence to Todd as a public comment. So it's there.
Good.
Phyllis,
Yes.
this is Debbie. In conversations with you over time, I got the impression that the model is close to being finished, but you felt as though the coordination on the Modesto side north of the river needed to take place first before you felt as though that the model was like quote final. Although you indicated earlier tonight that there's additional tweaking that might occur with the future water budgets and what have you. Do you expect big tweaking or little tweaking, or I don't know? I'm just curious.
Yeah, I don't expect major adjustments at all, to be honest. I mean, I think we can probably go through the future water budgets without any significant and substantial changes to the model, but we don't want, I'm just concerned that all of a sudden there are 4 and 5 versions of the model, within the subbasin, and we're having to pull time away from the technical team's tight schedule, and my concerns are a little more procedural, I think, than anything else. We did tweak, as you know. We presented this in the coordination meeting between the Modesto and Turlock subbasins. The analysis on the Modesto side of the Tuolumne did make a difference, and we did revise the water budgets in the Turlock subbasin based on what we saw there. There was a change of somewhere around 6,000 acre feet a year. And when you look at the overall, water budget decline of about 60,000 acre feet a year, then that was a 10% change in terms of the change in groundwater and storage. So I don't know. I look at 10% as being a little more than just a tweak, and I wouldn't expect there to be a lot more changes associated with the future projections than that. I think I'm just reacting. I'm hearing for the first time about sort of distribution of the model, and I'm thinking more about the actual process and procedures associated with that, and the time frame the time that I know that takes, with respect to being concerned that we've not completely finished using it, and every time you've not finished using it, there's always the opportunity for you to find something that you recognize is actually going to make a difference now and probably needs to be dealt with. So yeah, I am not trying to keep the model out of anybody's hands. I'm trying to just make sure that we're all aware of the impacts of someone else using it at this time.
Can I ask a question? This is Spreckros Grants about the availability of the model. Is it available to the public as well? And Philip, everything you said, I completely understand. I would just suggest any release of the model clearly says it's draft until it's not. But I'm also just wondering if the public will be able to see this, and if so, when.
Yeah, I'll leave that to the GSAs. I'm just the hydrogeologist here.
I was going to comment that one of the points of discussion that came up in that interbasin discussion was the DWR is developing its next generation of the C2V SIM fine grid model, pivoting off of some of this modern information. I believe there was discussion that that's going to be released imminently as a model. I didn't pick up the date. Is that something we can report out on, if not now, then at the next TAC meeting?
Yes, of course we can. And just teeing off of that comment, John, and especially given the conversation that we're having today with respect to availability of the model, one of the things that I would like the GSAs to consider is how best we might participate in that process. As DWR continues to calibrate its regional C2V SIM model, it occurs to me that it would be advantageous to this subbasin to share with DWR some of the improvements that we've made, such that the model is more capable of simulating local conditions. In the Kern subbasin, for example, although it's a critically overdrafted basin and the timing was different, when we revised the C2V SIM model for the Kern County subbasin, we immediately turned that model around. As soon as it was complete and had been used for the GSP, we turned that back over to DWR to incorporate that into the regional picture. This is really a win-win for everyone. It gives DWR the opportunity to refine and make its regional C2V SIM model more precise, and in particular more accurate with respect to conditions in your subbasin. So we can have that conversation. The timing, John, is that DWR, I believe DWR anticipates recalibration of C2V SIM occurring in the fall. And so we have a little bit of time, but we would like to, if we can get through these projected water budgets and everything looks good with respect to the model as a strong planning tool, which I anticipate it will, we can also have a quick discussion then about how much of that model we feel comfortable submitting to DWR for incorporation into the regional model.
Great.
Any other SIGMA related updates from the member agencies? Okay, hearing none. So we're just moving right along. Our next regular meeting is scheduled for June 25th. However, we did approve a special meeting on June 11th. So we'll all meet again virtually on June 11th. And I think that completes our items here. Is there a motion to adjourn? From anybody?
Ms. Curtis, I'll make the motion.
I was gonna say, I'm waiting for Curtis. Go.
I second that.
Before you adjourn, can I asked a question? I wonder if anybody was going to answer that.
I'm so sorry. Did I miss something? Could you ask it again? I'm so sorry.
This is Spreck Rosecrans. Phyllis, you deferred the question to the GSAs about availability of the model to the public. And I just wondered if there's somebody I should follow up with on that.
I would say, as far as I know, the GSAs haven't discussed that or had a conversation about that. So I don't know that I have an answer. Does anybody else have an answer?
Yeah, this came up in Stockton yesterday with the East San Joaquin group, and we realized that the model was funded with public money, and it is a public model. At some point in time, it will be released to the public. But like Phyllis was saying, the most important thing to keep track of is version control and who's using the model, what version they have. They'll be making citations of the model. We need to, protect our own interpretations and uses and applications and credibility. But short answer is it is a public model.
Yeah, thanks, Walt. Just for clarification, I'm way behind personally on the learning curve here, and I'm very far from any public use. And I don't want to, I just want to sort of, get up to speed, on this stuff as quickly as I can, and to be able to just get something even in draft form. And I have absolutely no interest in, in getting anything out that's not technically credible, and nothing's going to happen anytime soon.
Yeah.
So, that's just where I'm at on this. It's just a matter of timing. I'm pretty ignorant, and there's public information out there, and I'd like to sort of see how it's being characterized and organized.
Yeah, trust me, you wouldn't know what to do with the model when you did see it.
Okay, well,
I wouldn't either.
I'm forewarned.
Sorry, this is Valerie. I think that's true that we have been given a public resource, but the extent to which we have paid consultants to improve it, calibrate it, or populate it with more fine-grained data, I'm not entirely sure that is also treated similarly as public data. There are other basins that are considering that question, whether you have to disclose the product you receive and the product that you put together is not as clear. So I think that we should be all about disclosure and transparency, and to the point of being behind on stuff, there's probably a lot of ways you can catch up, but I don't want to make a definitive statement that the model as we have calibrated it is public.
And just for the record here, and some of you, may have been born after 1989, but I was the first person outside the Department of Water Resources to get to be allowed to use their statewide planning model at that time called DWR-SIM. And so it's been more than 30 years of having these discussions about having public data available to non-governmental organizations. And anyway, enough people know me out there. I'm not going to do anything crazy or stupid or leak anything to the wrong media. I'm just trying to learn here.
Yeah, this is Valerie again. I think that's great, and as you well know, there are other people in other basins have run models right before people turned in GSPs and come up with different metrics, and that has caused problems. So I think that as long as you're kind of working alongside and not going to run it at the last minute and publish different results to try to embarrass the information in the GSP. I think that's great, but we should be cautious that has happened before to a
I
basin not
understand. I need more friends, not fewer.
we all do.
So this is Kevin, to close the east side, does Dennis or Walt want to make a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
We're adjourned at 3:46. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Okay, and from the west, we had a motion from Curtis and a second from Karen. All in favor? Aye.
Hi.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. West Turlock TAC is also adjourned. Thank you very much, everybody.